contemplating. And this young fellow meets my question with silence. And then, like Mr. Paul himself, takes a tack of evasion and says finally, well, I can't argue with that with you, sir. So I said to him, I said, well, then I think you better get somebody who can. Because if Mr. Paul is running for president, himself thinking there's no monetary solution, whatever is he running for president for? So he left the phone and he looked for somebody else to take my call, which is a challenge of a proposition of mathematically perfected economy, intended to be, of course, a gentlemanly challenge. And it's met immediately with an outright refusal to even engage in the proposition that there is a monetary solution. And this person Ron Paul is running for president, and this is his campaign headquarters saying this to me. It's an incredible thing if you think about it. Particularly when in front of the cameras, all you see is this endless deluge of unqualifiable assertions, which are mere Austrian dogma that, in truth, any responsible citizen, however hopeful they may be that we're actually going to end this system, any of us should readily see through. So this is why we are going to dissect these propositions of Mr. Paul and Mr. Kucinich today. In the end, this fellow Andrew returns and says that there's really no one for me to talk to, and in other words, no one's interested in mathematically perfected economy. And this man, Ron Paul, is running for president on a campaign which is advocating there's no such thing as solution then. So I remarked to this young fellow that that's rather preposterous. He said, well, at best I could leave a post in these online forums that they had for introducing propositions and comments and whatever. And of course I'd already done that, and that's a preposterous vehicle. And to tell you the truth, this so disgusted me that I thought, well, I'll just make one conclusive statement. And so I got off the phone with this young fellow, Andrew, and I quickly typed out basically a transcript of our discussion. And then I went to the site, adding to it, of course, my explanation of, how readily the issues of economy are resolved. After all, as John Kennedy said, because our problems are man-made, they are readily solved. That is, we solve them by eradicating the injustices that some of us are imposing on the rest of us, which is the case of this purported central banking system. In any case, I went to the forums that Andrew had referred me to, and thinking, no, this isn't good enough. And I said, man, this is just going to be it. Ron Paul has avoided me for 30 years now, and I assert that it's because he doesn't have a conceivable avenue even for defeating this proposition of mathematically perfected economy. After all, can we not all understand how we can resolve this multiplication of artificial indebtedness into terminal failure? Can we not all understand readily how there is one and one only solution to inflation, deflation, and maldisposition, and how it's important to solve all of these? Ron Paul himself is decrying inflation as a cause of our problems, you see. It's preposterous for him to avoid an explanation of one and one only solution, especially when he's never provided any qualifying arguments how anything that he's ever proposed could possibly be a solution. So it's very important that these matters are discussed in a gentlemanly manner in front of the public, as the founders of the country, hammered out the form of the republic that ensued. And eventually I found a form to contact the head legal counsel for the Paul campaign, and it was just seemingly the most important position that was accessible. So I elected to use that form rather than the one that had been recommended to me, and I just copied and pasted the transcripts that I had recorded into that form, and with, of course, some remarks that I thought it was preposterous for the Paul campaign to run on a platform that advocated that there's no such thing as monetary solution. And to my surprise, the only time that I've actually heard from the Ron Paul people in response to my appeals, and to even the personal appeals of friends of Ron Paul who have personally presented them to him, that is, personally presented a proposition of mathematically perfected economy. So, to my surprise, I'm to hear back very soon, and the person who calls me, in fact, begs me to not take this retort of this telephone answering person, Andrew, as the official position of the campaign. The person further assures me that they've been to my web pages. They find them incredibly fascinating and sound, and to keep up the good work, that they promise to be watching my pages carefully. And of course, I never hear from them again. And Ron Paul goes on endlessly spewing the same ever unqualified dogma, which cannot solve our problems. So before I received that call, being as my adrenaline was levels were a little bit elevated from this preposterous encounter with the Paul campaign, I decided to give the Dennis Kucinich campaign a like try, and I was met by a far more professional reception. Likewise, it was a male respondent when I called the campaign headquarters, and I gave the exact same introduction that I just had to this Andrew at the Ron Paul campaign headquarters. And without even my asking, the respondent says, let me get you to someone who can who's higher in the campaign, who can field your proposition of mathematically perfected economy. Immediate interest, instead of rejection on a preposterous level, on a preposterous assertion that there can be no such thing as mathematically perfected economy. What a preposterous thing to assert, especially if you're running for president of the United States. And so I wait on a few minutes, and all of a sudden, the phone is answered by a fine gentleman of the name of Dennis Bright, I think was his name. And frankly, having a few moments of waiting and reflecting on this Ron Paul incident that I've just been through, I'm my mood is changing, and when this fellow introduces himself as Dennis Bright, I actually laughed. I said, well, at least it's good to be talking to somebody who is at least named Bright. and so I gave him the quick story of the call that I had just made to the Paul campaign headquarters, and we were both dying laughing about it. It was a great initial visit. And so I explained this thesis of mathematically perfected economy, likewise, in just a few minutes to David Bright, who was a great guy. And he said, he was entirely conducive to this and enthusiastic about it and grasped it perfectly well, just in a few minutes like this, which of course often happens. And he insists then that I send my proposition to him, which I've already got prepared, that I send it to him, and he would personally forward it to his Chicago people. And if they found any merit in it, of course, I would be hearing from them at their earliest convenience. Well, of course, judging from David Bright's enthusiastic reception, you would have thought we have a good chance. We would at least hear from the Kucinich economic policy team, because after all, can anyone prove that there's an alternate solution for inflation, deflation, and maldisposition? Absolutely not. In fact, deviate from this obligatory schedule of payment of mathematically perfected economy an iota, and you no longer have solved inflation and deflation. Likewise, pay any rate of interest, which has to be reborrowed to maintain a vital circulation, which means that it would be profitable to a purported banking system, and you inherently multiply artificial indebtedness in proportion to a circulation until you suffer terminal artificial indebtedness. And likewise, the integral combination of those two solutions solves systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property, under which all other offenses fall. So it's preposterous to think that it's impossible to prescribe a mathematically perfected economy or to solve the monetary issues, which solution then, of course, inherently defines a mathematically perfected economy. And so I send my papers off to Mr. Bright by email, and he's forwarding them to the Chicago people, and I never hear from the Kucinich campaign again. Well, there's a reason why. And this reason why, unfortunately, reflects on this purported Need Act, which I'm going to discuss today. In the late 90s, after suffering substantial previous plagiarism, I heard one day by email from a fellow. He never called me or anything. A fellow named Steven Zarlinga. I knew nothing of this man. He sent me an email. Now, of course, the prior history of this is that I am the first and the only online monetary reform presence, clear back in 1983 and 4, when my material was posted more or less as a whistleblowing endeavor to public bulletin boards at various colleges generally, complete with the binaries and source code of the computer models that I provided the Reagan administration, which projected that the present failure would transpire at approximately 2010 AD. Now, I should probably explain